In a glass lobby, a little boy clutches a lunchbox and begs the most powerful woman in the building to bring his mom back. The room stops. Phones rise. Hearts crack. Mommy says you're my daddy. The CEO promises help, but the board smells scandal. Jobs hang by a thread. A city takes sides. A hidden act of courage. A note about the one upstairs. A truth stranger than rumor. A single dad fighting for respect. A child begging to be safe. Power tested by grief. Policy tested by love. When the truth finally rises, will it heal a family or destroy everything they're trying to save? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun streamed through Vale Tower's glass walls, turning the marble lobby into a cathedral of light. 7-year-old Eli Alvarez stood there, small and determined in his wrinkled school uniform, his Spider-Man backpack clutched tight against his chest. The security guards at the front desk exchanged uncertain glances as the boy approached. His sneakers squeaked against the polished floor, echoing in the vast space. "Can I please see the person in charge?" Eli's voice trembled but stayed strong. "The one who fixes everything?" Sandra, the receptionist, leaned forward with a gentle smile. "Sweetheart, where are your parents?" "My daddy's at work. And Mommy." Eli's lower lip quivered. "Mommy went to heaven 3 months ago. But the big people here fix broken things, right? That's what Mommy always said about the ones upstairs." The lobby fell quiet. A few early morning employees slowed their hurried pace. Coffee cups paused halfway to their lips. That's when Harper Vale emerged from the elevator, her heels clicking purposefully across the marble floor. She wore a crisp navy blazer and carried a leather portfolio, every inch the CEO heading into another busy Monday. "Ms. Vale," Sandra called out, relief in her voice. This young man, but Eli, had already spotted Harper. He rushed forward, hope blazing in his eyes. "Are you the one who fixes things?" Harper stopped. Something in the boy's desperate expression made her set down her portfolio and kneel to his level, navy blazer and all. "Can you make Mommy come back?" Eli's words came out in a rush. "Please? I'll be really good. I won't ask for anything else ever." Harper's carefully maintained composure softened. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Eli. Eli Alvarez. My mommy was Ava Santos. She cleaned offices here at night." Recognition flickered in Harper's eyes. Behind them, phones began to appear, recording the scene. A guard muttered, "Always something with the night shift people." But another worker quickly shushed him. "Eli!" A man's panicked voice cut through the lobby. Ben Alvarez burst through the revolving doors, still in his janitor's uniform from his night shift. His face was sheened with sweat, terror written across his features. "Mijo, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be at school." "I had to ask, Daddy," Eli said, his voice small but determined. "I had to ask the ones upstairs to bring Mommy back." Ben's face crumpled with grief and embarrassment. "Miss Vale, I am so sorry. He must have slipped away from the school drop-off line. I'll take him." "It's all right, Mr. Alvarez." Harper's voice was gentle but firm. She hadn't risen from her kneeling position. "Eli, I wish with all my heart I could bring your mommy back, but there are some broken things that even the most powerful people can't fix." Tears welled in Eli's eyes. One of the lobby guards, an older woman with kind eyes, stepped forward with a tissue box. Harper continued, her voice soft but clear in the hushed lobby. "What we can do is find every way to remember your mom right, to honor how hard she worked, how much she loved you, and make sure her memory stays bright and beautiful. Would you like to help me do that?" Eli's face crumpled, and he fell forward into Harper's shoulder, sobbing. The tissue-bearing guard wiped her own eyes. Phones captured the moment the composed CEO wrapped her arms around the grieving child, her own eyes glistening. Ben stood frozen, one hand pressed to his mouth, watching his son receive the comfort he'd been unable to provide through his own grief and exhaustion. Cammie Dorsey from HR had appeared somewhere in the commotion. She stepped forward now, her voice low and professional. "Miss Vale, perhaps we should move somewhere more private?" Harper nodded, still holding Eli. She stood smoothly, keeping one hand on his shoulder. "Mr. Alvarez, would you join us upstairs?" "Lisa," she called to her hovering assistant, "hold all my meetings this morning." The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. As Harper guided father and son inside, camera flashes sparkled off the lobby's marble walls. Kami stepped in last, positioning herself to block the view as the doors slid closed. In the sudden quiet of the executive floor corridor, their footsteps were muffled by thick carpeting. Eli had stopped crying but kept close to Harper's side as she led them toward the conference room, his small hand still clutching his backpack strap like an anchor. Through the glass walls, the city stretched out below them, bathed in morning light. But none of them looked out at the view as Harper opened the conference room door, ushering in this small family whose grief had transformed an ordinary Monday morning into something else entirely. The conference room fell silent. Ben Alvarez's face drained of color as his son held up a crumpled piece of paper pulled from between the pages of Ava's Bible. Eli's innocent voice rang clear in the hushed space. "Mommy says you're my daddy." Harper Vale's perfectly maintained composure cracked. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the edge of the polished conference table to steady herself. The morning sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows suddenly felt too bright, too exposing. I'm sorry, what did you say?" Harper managed, her voice gentler than she'd intended. She glanced at Ben, whose embarrassment was written across his features. "Eli Mijo, where did you get that paper?" Ben asked, his voice rough with emotion. He reached for the note, but Eli clutched it closer. "In Mommy's special Bible," Eli said, pointing to the worn book on the table. "She always kept it in her lunchbox when she worked." Cammy Dorsey, who had been quietly observing from near the door, stepped forward. "Eli, may I see the note? I promise to be very careful with it." After a moment's hesitation, Eli nodded and handed over the paper. Cammy smoothed it carefully on the table. The handwriting was neat but showed signs of fatigue, as if written during a late-night shift. She read aloud. "Tell Eli, the one upstairs, is like a father to this city." Ben's shoulders sagged with relief, though his cheeks remained flushed. "Ms. Vale, I am so sorry about this misunderstanding. Ava," she worked the night shift, cleaning the upper floors, including the 46th. Harper shook her head, her professional demeanor returning but tempered with kindness. "Please, there's no need to apologize. I understand how a child might interpret those words." She turned to Eli, who looked confused by the adult's reactions. "Eli, I never had the chance to meet your mom personally, but I've heard she was an amazing person." A soft chime from Cammy's phone broke the moment. She glanced at it and frowned. "Ms. Vale, we might have a situation developing. The lobby incident is already online, and now." She held up her phone, showing a social media feed exploding with speculation. The headline, "CEO's Secret Child," blazed across the screen. "I need to handle this," Harper said firmly. She turned to Ben, her expression serious but compassionate. "Mr. Alvarez, I want you to know that we're going to handle this situation with the utmost care and respect. First, I'm authorizing immediate paid leave for you, and we'll arrange grief counseling for Eli." Ben started to protest. "Ms. Vale, that's not necessary. Please," Harper held up a hand. "This isn't charity. This is what we should have had in place all along." She glanced at Kami, who was already making notes on her tablet. "We're going to find out the truth about what your wife meant in that note, but we'll do it in a way that protects Eli." Kami stepped closer, her voice low and urgent. "We need to be extremely careful about how we proceed. The media will be watching every move." Harper nodded, then turned back to Eli, who had been quietly drawing on a piece of paper he'd found. "Eli, would you and your dad like to come with me? I can show you where your mom used to work at night. The view from upstairs is pretty amazing." Eli's face lit up. "Can we see where Mommy cleaned the windows? She said she could see the whole world from up there." "Of course," Harper said softly. She glanced at Ben, who gave a slight nod of approval. "Let's go see your mom's view of the world." Cammy opened the conference room door, checking that the hallway was clear. Outside, the morning sun continued to climb higher over the city, its light reflecting off the tower's countless windows. Windows that Ava Santos had once cleaned in the quiet hours of the night, leaving behind a mystery that her son had innocently brought into the light of day. The elevator doors opened onto the 46th floor, revealing a maze of cubicles bathed in late morning light. Eli's small hand remained firmly clasped in Harper's as they stepped out, his other hand clutching his mother's Bible close to his chest. Ben followed behind them, his work uniform feeling out of place among the pristine office spaces. "Your mom spent a lot of time up here," Harper said softly to Eli, leading them past rows of empty desks. The floor was quiet, most employees away at meetings or lunch. Eli's eyes widened as they approached a small break room tucked into a corner. "Mommy liked this place," he exclaimed, pressing his face against the glass door. "She said the coffee smelled nice." Ben cleared his throat. Ava would joke about how fancy the upstairs coffee was compared to our break room downstairs. His voice carried a hint of embarrassment. "She'd say the upstairs folks sure know how to live." Harper's expression softened. "The building does have these invisible lines," she admitted, gesturing around them. "Upper floors, lower floors. It shouldn't be that way." She paused, watching Eli explore the break room with curious eyes. "Your mother was right to notice it." They settled at a small table by the window. The city stretched out below them, a tapestry of buildings and streets bathed in sunlight. Harper pulled out a chair for Eli, who immediately reached for a paper and pen from the nearby counter. "I've worked in this building for 15 years, Harper said, her voice growing quiet. "Started at the bottom, actually. Back then, I was still married." She glanced at Ben, who looked up from his phone with surprise. "My husband David passed away 12 years ago. Cancer." Ben's defensive posture eased slightly. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "Ava, it was sudden. An accident." Harper nodded, understanding passing between them. "Grief has a way of making even the tallest buildings feel small, doesn't it?" Eli looked up from his drawing. "Are you sad, like Daddy is sad?" he asked Harper directly. "Sometimes," Harper answered honestly. "But we learn to carry it better with time." Eli pushed his completed drawing across the table. On the paper was a child's rendering of Vale Tower, surprisingly detailed for his age. At the very top, he'd drawn a big red heart. "That's where the happy is supposed to go," he explained seriously. "Mommy said there's always something good up high." Harper studied the drawing, touching the heart gently. "She was very wise, your mom." She stood up, straightening her skirt. "Would you like to see something special? Something even higher than this floor?" They took a service elevator to the roof. The door opened to reveal a construction area, but beyond the tools and tarps lay a partially completed garden. Planters lined the edges, waiting for spring flowers. Benches sat partially unwrapped, facing the spectacular city view. "This is going to be our Hope Garden," Harper explained, leading them to a clear spot. "It's not finished yet, but I think," she looked at both Ben and Eli, "this could be a perfect place to remember your mom. Quiet, peaceful, close to the sky, she cleaned under every night." Eli's face lit up. "Can we put flowers? Mommy liked yellow ones?" "Of course we can," Harper smiled. "We'll make it beautiful." Ben's phone buzzed again. It had been vibrating periodically throughout their tour. He glanced at it, his jaw tightening. Harper caught a glimpse of messages flooding in, some with crude memes about the morning's events. His coworkers were already spreading jokes and speculation. "Mr. Alvarez," she said formally, noting his discomfort, "we should head back down. Kami will want to meet with us." The elevator ride down was heavy with unspoken tension. Kami joined them on the executive floor, her tablet filled with notes. "We should review the note properly," she said gently. "And I've contacted a wonderful child grief counselor who can see Eli this afternoon if you're comfortable with that." Ben looked at his son, who was starting to show signs of fatigue from the emotional morning. "Yes," he agreed, his protective instinct clear in his voice. "Whatever helps Eli." Kami smiled warmly at the boy. "She's very nice, Eli. She helps lots of kids who miss their mommies and daddies." "Will she help me draw more pictures?" Eli asked, clutching his tower drawing. "As many as you want," Kami assured him. Harper watched the interaction, her professional mask back in place, but her eyes remained soft as they followed Eli's movements. The morning had stripped away layers of corporate distance, replacing them with something more human, more vulnerable. The note's mystery still loomed, but for now, the priority was clear. Protect this child, honor his mother's memory, and find a way through this that preserved everyone's dignity. Ben held Eli's hand a little tighter as they descended, his phone mercifully silent for the moment. The boy leaned against his father's side, tired but somehow lighter than he'd been that morning. Above them, the unfinished garden waited, promising a space where memories could bloom alongside hope. A small smile tugged at Ben's lips, but his eyes held a touch of sadness. She'd tell me about the view up here, too. Said it made the city look magical at night. Harper guided them toward a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows. Eli pressed his hands against the glass, gazing out at the sprawling cityscape below. Kami hung back, discreetly taking notes on her tablet. "The one upstairs," Eli whispered, his breath fogging the window. "Is that you, Miss Vale? Did Mommy know you?" Harper knelt beside him, choosing her words carefully. "I wish I had known your mom better, Eli. In this building, people sometimes say, 'upstairs,' when they mean the offices where decisions are made. But it can also mean anyone who works on these higher floors." Kami stepped forward, the note from Ava's Bible now carefully preserved in a clear folder. "The exact words are interesting," she said gently. "Tell Eli, the one upstairs is like a father to this city. It could mean many things." Ben shifted uncomfortably. "Ava was religious. Maybe she meant—" He trailed off, looking upward. "It could be about leadership in general," Harper added thoughtfully. "Or someone specific she met during her shifts. We'll need to look into this carefully, but always with respect for your family's privacy." Kami nodded, her fingers moving swiftly across her tablet. "I'm drafting guidelines right now. We'll make sure everyone understands this is a sensitive matter. No gossip, no speculation. Just support and resources for your family. The company has counselors who specialize in helping children through grief," Harper said, watching Eli trace patterns on the window with his finger. "And we have a hardship fund that could help with." She paused, meeting Ben's eyes. "With any remaining medical expenses from Ava's illness." Ben's shoulders stiffened. "I appreciate that, Miss Vale, but I can't." "It's not charity," Harper interrupted softly. "It's what we owe our people. What I owe Eli's mother, who helped keep this building running every night." Eli turned from the window. "Dad, remember what Pastor Ruth says about pride and helping hands?" Ben's expression softened at his son's words. He looked down at his worn work shoes, then back at Harper. "The counseling. That would be good for Eli. And maybe—" He swallowed hard. "Maybe we could talk about the other help later." "Of course," Harper said. She checked her watch. "It's getting late. Let me arrange a car to take you both home." They made their way back to the elevator, the note safely stored in Kami's folder. In the lobby, Harper spoke quietly with her assistant, while Ben helped Eli put on his backpack. "Ben," Harper said, approaching them as a sleek black car pulled up outside. "Would it be all right if I visited tonight? I'd like to meet your mother, hear more about Ava." Ben blinked in surprise, clearly not expecting this request from the CEO. After a moment, he nodded. "Mom makes the best caldo. She'd like to thank you properly for being kind to Eli." "Dad makes good soup too," Eli added, slipping his small hand into Ben's, "but Grandma's is better." The tension in Ben's shoulders eased slightly as he smiled down at his son. "That's true, mijo. That's very true." "I'll be there around 7, if that works?" Harper asked. "Yes," Ben replied. "That would be fine." He guided Eli toward the waiting car, both turning to wave goodbye before climbing in. Kami appeared at Harper's side as they watched the car pull away. "I'll have the memo drafted within the hour. Clear guidelines about privacy, support resources, and a zero-tolerance policy for workplace gossip." Harper nodded, her eyes still on the departing car. "Make it strong but compassionate. This isn't about damage control. It's about doing right by a family that's part of our community here." "And the investigation into the note? Discreet, thorough, but always with their dignity as the priority." Harper turned to head back to her office. "We owe them that much." The lobby buzzed with the day's normal activity, but now there was an undercurrent of whispers and glances. Harper straightened her shoulders, every inch the composed CEO again, though her thoughts remained with the small boy who believed so deeply in the power of those upstairs to make things right. The aroma of simmering caldo filled the modest apartment kitchen. Mama Luz stirred the pot with practiced care, adding a pinch of cilantro while Harper sat at the small wooden table. Steam rose from the ceramic bowls between them, carrying memories and comfort. "We wake up to tears," Mama Luz said softly, her weathered hands folding together. "But joy comes in the morning." Psalm 30:5. She smiled at Harper, who had removed her blazer and rolled up her sleeves. "Sometimes the morning takes its time coming, but it comes." Harper nodded, her usual corporate composure softening in the warmth of the kitchen. "My husband," she began, then paused to steady her voice. "James passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. Some mornings still feel dark." "Ah." Mama Luz reached across the table and squeezed Harper's hand. "Then you know." The empty chair at the table speaks louder than words. In the living room, Eli sat cross-legged on the carpet, colored markers scattered around him as he worked intently on a drawing. Ben watched from the doorway, his work uniform still on from his shortened shift. "Eli, my amor," Mama Luz called. "Show Miss Vale your picture." Eli jumped up, clutching his paper. He approached Harper shyly, then held out his artwork. The drawing showed Vale Tower, surprisingly detailed for a 7-year-old's work. At the very top, where the 46th floor would be, he had drawn a large red heart. Rays of yellow sunshine sprouted from it like a crown. "The one upstairs," Eli explained seriously, pointing to the heart. "That's where the helping happens." "A child's true map," Mama Luz said softly. "They see straight to the heart of things, no?" Harper studied the drawing, touching the corner gently. "May I keep this, Eli? I'd like to frame it for my office." Ben cleared his throat, sinking into a kitchen chair. "About the night shifts." He glanced at his son, then continued carefully. "Ava worked doubles whenever she could." "The medical bills." He rubbed his face. "The late bus routes through our neighborhood aren't safe. Sometimes she'd wait an hour for a transfer, especially in winter. She'd pray while waiting," Mama Luz added, ladling more caldo into Ben's bowl. "And text me when she got to each stop. Such a good girl, my Ava." Harper set down her spoon, her expression troubled. "The company should have provided transportation, basic safety measures." She straightened, decision settling in her eyes. "We need a memorial fund, not just for Ava, for all our night staff. Transportation stipends, better shift coordination, security escorts. Policy is love when it's in public," Mama Luz said firmly. "When it protects everyone's children, not just one." Ben's shoulders tensed. "We don't want charity." "Not charity," Harper interrupted gently. "Justice, safety, dignity." She met his gaze. "What Ava deserved, what you all deserve." Eli had curled up on the couch with his mother's Bible and the battered lunchbox she'd used for late shifts. His eyes were heavy, fingers tracing the worn cover. "We'll start with the counseling tomorrow," Harper said, rising and retrieving her blazer. "A specialist in childhood grief. I'll have my office send the details in the morning." At the apartment door, Ben watched Harper gather her things. Through the living room doorway, they could see Eli finally asleep, the Bible and lunchbox tucked safely beside him like treasured toys. "Thank you," Ben said quietly, "for listening, for seeing us." Mama Luz appeared with a container of leftover caldo. "For your drive home," she insisted, pressing it into Harper's hands. "Remember, joy comes in the morning." Harper nodded, touched by the simple kindness. As she stepped into the hallway, she glanced back at the peaceful scene. Eli, sleeping, Ben's protective stance, Mama Luz's quiet strength. In the morning, they would begin building something new from their shared grief. But for now, this moment of understanding was enough. Ben arrived early for his afternoon shift, his footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway of Vale Tower's basement level. The familiar scent of industrial cleaners filled the air as he made his way to the employee break room. His shoulders tensed as he heard laughter spilling through the doorway. "Hey, Alvarez," Mike Sanders, the day shift supervisor, called out with a smirk. "Saw you on Twitter this morning. Moving up in the world, huh?" Ben kept his expression neutral as he walked to his locker. A few other workers glanced away, uncomfortable. Rosa, who'd worked with Ava for years, shot Mike a disapproving look. "Must be nice," Mike continued, leaning against the wall. "Like hitting the lottery with that note. Bet the CEO's got deeper pockets than a night janitor, right?" The room went quiet. Ben methodically hung up his jacket, counting breaths like the counselor had taught Eli. Rosa stepped forward, coffee cup gripped tight. "That's enough, Mike. Just saying what everyone's thinking." Mike shrugged. "These things happen. Rich folks, night shift, who knows what goes on after hours." "My wife," Ben said quietly, turning to face Mike, "was a woman of faith and dignity. She worked hard to provide for our son." His voice remained steady, but his eyes held steel. Anyone suggesting otherwise should be careful. Several workers nodded in agreement. Ben noticed Janet from accounting giving him a sympathetic smile, while Todd from maintenance pointedly moved away from Mike's corner. He made mental notes of who showed kindness versus cruelty. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Ava's memory. 46 floors above, Harper Vale stood at her office window, phone pressed to her ear as Jared Klein's voice filled the room through the speaker. "The media coverage is spreading," Jared said, his tone clipped. "Major outlets are picking up the story. We need to get ahead of this." "By doing what, exactly?" Harper asked, watching the city below. "Dragging a grieving 7-year-old boy through the mud?" "By protecting the company's reputation," Jared countered. "The board is concerned about the implications. A night worker's child claiming paternity? The optics are devastating." "The night worker had a name," Harper said. "Ava Santos. And her son is not a PR crisis to be managed." Other board members murmured on the call. Martha Chen, head of PR, cleared her throat. "We've drafted a statement emphasizing the company's commitment to supporting all employees while firmly denying any improper relationships." "No," Harper said flatly. "We're not issuing any statement that could hurt that child." "With respect, Miss Vale," legal counsel James Weber interjected, "we have a solution that could put this matter to rest quickly. A simple DNA test would—" "Absolutely not," Harper cut in. "We're not subjecting anyone to genetic testing over a child's misunderstood note. The test would be completely voluntary," Jared said smoothly. "Just a way to clear the air." "There's no such thing as voluntary when someone's job hangs in the balance," Harper replied. "And I won't be party to coercing a grieving family." "Speaking of jobs," Jared's voice took on an edge, "the board has concerns about potential liability. If there was any improper fraternization during night shifts, the company could be exposed." Harper's hand tightened on the phone. "Are you suggesting we threaten people's employment over unsubstantiated rumors?" "We're suggesting," Jared said, "that cooperation with a reasonable investigation should be a condition of continued employment. For everyone's protection." The implied threat hung in the air. Harper turned from the window, jaw set. "I'll remind the board that discriminatory termination carries its own liability, as does creating a hostile work environment." "No one's talking about discrimination," Jared said. "Just due diligence. The DNA test request will come through proper HR channels, purely voluntary, of course." "Of course," Harper's voice dripped skepticism. "Is that all?" After the call ended, Harper sat heavily in her chair. Minutes later, Kami knocked and entered, holding 2 manila envelopes. "The board's lawyers worked fast," Kami said quietly, placing the DNA test requests on Harper's desk. "They want these delivered by end of day." Harper stared at the envelopes, each marked with their names. "Benjamin Alvarez" and "Harper Vale." "The language is carefully crafted," Kami continued. "Voluntary testing. All expenses covered. But the fine print," she trailed off, "makes it clear what happens if we refuse," Harper finished. She picked up the envelopes, their weight feeling far heavier than paper should. "Have Ben come up, please. He should hear this from me directly." When Ben arrived, his face showed he already knew something was wrong. He stood straight-backed as Kami handed them each an envelope, pride and worry warring in his expression. The three of them looked at the innocuous-seeming papers that could destroy careers, dignity, and the fragile trust they'd built. No one spoke. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the office floor, and somewhere 46 stories below, the city went about its business, unaware of the quiet battle being waged in its tallest tower. Pastor Ruth's small office at Grace Community Church felt like a sanctuary from the chaos. Warm lamplight softened the edges of worn bookshelves, and a cross hung simply on the wall behind her desk. Ben sat in one of the cushioned chairs, while Harper took the other, both of them exhausted from the day's events. "First, let's pray," Pastor Ruth said, her calm voice steadying the room. She bowed her head, and they followed suit. "Lord, guide us to your truth, and help us walk this path with dignity and grace. Amen." When they looked up, Pastor Ruth's eyes were kind but serious. "Now, let's talk about what's really happening here." Ben shifted in his chair. "The board wants DNA tests. They're calling it voluntary, but there's nothing voluntary about threatening someone's job." Pastor Ruth finished. She turned to Harper. "And you?" Harper straightened her blazer, a habit when she felt defensive. "If I refuse, the board will likely force a vote of no confidence. Everything we're trying to do for the night shift workers, for Eli's counseling, it all stops." Pastor Ruth leaned back, studying them both. "And have either of you considered how this story is being shaped by things bigger than both of you?" Ben's jaw tightened. "You mean how everyone's quick to assume the worst about the Latino janitor and his kid?" "Exactly," Pastor Ruth nodded. "And how corporate power structures tend to protect themselves first, truth second. This isn't just about DNA, it's about who gets believed, who gets protected, and who gets sacrificed." Harper's composed expression cracked slightly. "I want to protect Eli and honor Ava's memory, but every time I try to control the narrative, it slips away," Pastor Ruth finished. "Because control isn't what's needed here. Truth is. Truth in the light, with dignity in the process." Ben rubbed his face with his hands. "I don't want my son turned into some media circus. But if I say no to the test, I look guilty. If I say yes," his voice trailed off. "Then you feel like you're letting them win," Pastor Ruth supplied gently. "Pride is a tricky thing, Ben. Sometimes it protects us, sometimes it traps us." Harper pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. "What if we created strict privacy protocols? Independent lab, results sealed, except for specific named individuals?" Pastor Ruth nodded approvingly. "Now you're thinking about dignity in the process. What else?" "No press involvement," Ben said firmly. "Eli stays completely out of it." "I'll call Kami," Harper said, already dialing. "She can draft the protocol right now." 20 minutes later, Kami arrived with her laptop. The small office grew crowded but focused as she typed, reading aloud as she went. "Results sealed and delivered only to Ms. Vale, Mr. Alvarez, Board Chair and Corporate Counsel. No copies retained by lab. All parties sign non-disclosure agreements. Testing conducted at neutral location. No press statements regarding testing or results without mutual written consent. Mr. Alvarez's employment status protected regardless of outcome. Eli Alvarez, explicitly excluded from all public discussion." "Add something about the Memorial Fund and night shift safety policies," Ben said. "Those continue no matter what." Harper nodded. "Absolutely. Kami, put that in." Pastor Ruth watched as Kami refined the document, occasionally suggesting stronger language around privacy and protection. When it was done, she read it one final time and looked at them both. "This protects dignity. But are you both ready for whatever truth comes?" Harper reached for the paper first. "Truth in the light," she said quietly, and signed. Ben stared at the document for a long moment. Pastor Ruth touched his shoulder gently. "Remember, God already knows the truth. We're just catching up." He took a deep breath and signed. Later that night, Ben knelt beside Eli's bed. The boy's dark curls splayed across his pillow, Ava's Bible clutched to his chest even in sleep. Ben's throat tightened as he smoothed his son's hair. "Dear God," he whispered, "protect the truth. Help us honor Mommy's memory. And," he paused, glancing at the Bible in Eli's arms, "help us trust that you're the real one, upstairs watching over us all." Standing, he pulled out his phone and typed a short message to Harper. "We'll do it, tomorrow morning." His finger hovered over the send button for just a moment before pressing it. Through Eli's window, the lights of Vale Tower glowed in the distance, a reminder of how much had changed in just 2 days. He tucked the blanket more securely around his son and sent the message. The next morning at Citywide Medical Center, Ben and Harper sat in pristine vinyl chairs, waiting for the lab technician. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air. Kami stood nearby, reviewing paperwork with sharp attention to detail. "Mr. Alvarez? Ms. Vale?" A technician in blue scrubs appeared, clipboard in hand. "I'm Dr. Chen. If you'll follow me, please." They walked down a quiet hallway to a small consultation room. Dr. Chen's manner was professional but gentle as she explained the process. "The DNA analysis involves several steps," she said, laying out forms on the desk. "We're looking at a timeline of about 2 weeks for final confirmation. However, we might see preliminary indicators sooner." Ben's hands tightened on the armrests of his chair. 2 weeks? "We prioritize accuracy over speed," Dr. Chen explained. "Each sample goes through multiple verification stages." Harper leaned forward. "What about additional security measures? We have standard protocols." "I'd like to add an independent verification step," Harper interrupted softly. "Chain of custody documentation at every stage. I'll cover any extra costs." Ben glanced at her, surprised by this gesture of protection. "Thank you," he said quietly. Dr. Chen nodded. "We can arrange that. It won't affect the timeline." The actual sample collection took only minutes. Cotton swabs, sealed tubes, careful labeling. When it was done, Kami took photos of every document with her phone, building their own record. Back at Vale Tower, the morning's clinical sterility gave way to corporate tension. Harper's assistant met them at the elevator, face pinched with worry. "The board called an emergency session while you were out," she said, falling into step beside them. "They've frozen the Memorial Fund authorization." Harper's steps faltered for just a moment. "On what grounds?" Jared cited prudent financial oversight, pending resolution of outstanding matters. The assistant's air quotes made her opinion clear. Ben felt his stomach twist. He'd seen this before, the slow squeeze of institutional pressure. Around them, employees tried not to stare while obviously watching every move. In the HR office, Kami's computer pinged with a flood of meeting notifications. "They're moving everything up," she said, scanning her screen. "Jared wants daily updates on the situation." "The situation," Ben echoed bitterly. "That's what they're calling it?" Harper turned to face him fully. "Ben, I promise you." "Don't," he said not unkindly. "Don't make promises you might not be able to keep. I've got a son to think about." A group of executives walked past the glass walls, their whispered conversation falling silent as they looked in. Ben felt their stares like physical weight. "We should get you home," Kami said, gathering her things. "I'll have a car brought around." As they waited in the lobby, Ben watched the morning shift workers stream past. Some nodded to him, others avoided eye contact. He wondered how many would still treat him normally in 2 weeks. Kami's phone buzzed again. She read the message and her shoulders tensed. "Board meeting's been moved to tomorrow morning," she said. "They want a full briefing on all related matters." Harper's face remained composed, but her fingers worked at her wedding ring. A tell Ben had noticed when she was stressed. "We knew this would get harder before it got easier, did we?" Ben asked quietly. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like the machine's just warming up." The car arrived, sleek and black and corporate anonymous. As Ben slid into the back seat, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the tinted window. A tired man caught between forces much bigger than himself. Through the closing door, he heard Kami murmur to Harper, "Jared's requesting individual meetings with board members before tomorrow." The car pulled away from Vale Tower, its glass and steel reaching up into a sky that suddenly felt very far away. Ben thought of Eli, probably working on multiplication tables in his classroom right now, blissfully unaware of how adults could turn compassion into suspicion and truth into a weapon. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to Mama Luz. "Heading home. Could use some of that faith right now." Her reply came quickly. "Faith isn't about knowing the end, my Joe. It's about taking the next right step." Ben looked back at Vale Tower, shrinking in the rearview mirror. The next right step. If only he knew what that was anymore. The DNA testing took less than 30 minutes. As Ben and Harper emerged from the clinic into the bright morning sun, a sleek black car waited at the curb. Harper's driver opened the trunk, revealing a large, wicker basket. "Before you head home," Harper said, lifting the basket with care, "I wanted to give you this." Ben's first instinct was to refuse, but something in Harper's expression made him pause. It wasn't pity he saw there, but genuine concern. "It's mostly practical things," she explained, handing him the basket. "There's a complete schedule for Eli's counseling sessions with Dr. Martinez. She specializes in children's grief counseling and has an office near Eli's school." Ben peered inside. Beyond the paperwork, he spotted gift cards for the local grocery store, bus passes, and a sealed envelope with Eli's name written in Harper's neat handwriting. "That's my direct office line," Harper said, nodding toward the envelope. "For Eli, if he gets scared at school or needs to talk, the counselor said it's important he feels he has support systems in place." Ben's throat tightened. "Thank you," he managed. The next few days fell into a new rhythm. Mornings meant getting Eli ready for school, making sure he had his lunchbox and his mother's Bible. Ben would catch a few hours of sleep while Eli was at school, then wake up to make dinner before his evening shift at Vale Tower. Twice a week, Dr. Martinez's warm office became part of their routine. The walls were painted in soft colors, with comfortable chairs and boxes of toys. While Eli worked through his grief with drawing and play therapy, Ben sat in the waiting room, alternating between dozing and reading old magazines. At Vale Tower, Cammie had been busy. She set up a confidential hotline for night shift workers to report safety concerns. "Complete anonymity," she assured Ben when she showed him the system. "We want people to feel safe speaking up about late-night transit issues, security concerns, anything that makes them feel vulnerable." The hotline number appeared on break room bulletin boards throughout the building. Ben noticed more security cameras being installed in the parking garage and a new policy requiring 2 guards to escort night workers to their cars or the bus stop. But not everything had changed for the better. Walking through the building's halls during his shift, Ben caught snippets of conversations that went quiet when he approached. Some coworkers were supportive, offering encouraging words or small gestures of kindness. Others watched him with barely concealed curiosity or judgment. Mama Lou's kept their home running as always, making sure Eli did his homework and saying extra prayers before bed. She handled the growing media attention with quiet dignity, closing the curtains when news vans appeared on their street and screening their calls. The prepaid grocery card proved more helpful than Ben wanted to admit. With his schedule stretched thin between work, Eli's counseling, and their new daily routines, being able to stock up on essentials without worrying about the budget was a relief. Eli seemed to be adjusting, though he still carried his mother's Bible everywhere. Dr. Martinez said this was normal, a way of maintaining connection. The boy had started drawing more pictures of Vale Tower, always with that distinctive heart near the top floors. Sometimes he added stick figures: himself, his father, and increasingly, Harper. One Wednesday evening, as Ben prepared for his night shift, he found Eli sitting on his bed, carefully writing something. "What's that, my Joe?" he asked, adjusting his uniform shirt. "A letter for Miss Harper," Eli said, tongue between his teeth as he concentrated. "Dr. Martinez said I could write to her if I want to say thank you." Ben's heart squeezed. Despite everything, the tests, the rumors, the upheaval, Harper had kept her word about protecting Eli's dignity. The counseling was helping. The support systems were real, and not once had she used their situation for publicity or damage control. At 8:45 that evening, Ben did his usual security check of their apartment door. The hallway lights flickered slightly, casting weak shadows on the worn carpet. As he turned the key in the lock, Mrs. Rodriguez from apartment 4B passed by with her laundry basket. "Buena suerte, Ben," she said warmly, though her eyes held worry. "We're all praying for you and little Eli." "Gracias," he replied, managing a small smile. As he headed toward the stairwell, the sound of a television drifted from an open window. A news anchor's voice carried clearly, "Still no results in the Vale Tower lottery baby scandal." Ben's steps faltered for just a moment, the word lottery hitting him like a physical blow. Then he straightened his shoulders and kept walking. He had a job to do, a son to provide for, and dignity to maintain. The truth would come out eventually. Until then, he would focus on what mattered, keeping Eli safe and stable through all of this. "Time to clock in," he murmured to himself, pushing through the building's heavy front door into the warm evening air. The bus that would take him to Vale Tower was just pulling up to the corner, right on schedule. Ben sat on the worn couch in his living room, the wicker basket from Harper now unpacked on the coffee table. Eli sprawled on the carpet nearby, surrounded by his colored pencils, carefully shading what looked like a garden full of flowers. Mama Luz settled into her favorite armchair, her Bible open in her lap. A knock at the door made them all look up. Ben opened it to find Ray, one of Vale Tower's security guards, shifting uncomfortably in the hallway. "Mr. Alvarez," Ray said, removing his cap. "I wanted to stop by on my way to work. About yesterday, that joke some of the guys were making in the break room." He cleared his throat. "It wasn't right. I should have spoken up." Ben studied the guard's face, seeing genuine remorse there. "Thank you for coming by," he said quietly. "I've been doing security at Vale for 12 years now," Ray continued. "Worked plenty of night shifts myself. I know how hard it can be." He straightened his shoulders. "I want you to know, I'll be keeping a special eye on the night shift lockers from now on. No more harassment." Before Ben could respond, Eli appeared at his side. "Are you from the tower?" he asked Ray. "Do you know where Mommy used to work?" Ray's expression softened as he knelt to Eli's level. "I sure did know your mom. She always said hello to everyone, even at 3 in the morning. Had the brightest smile." Eli beamed at this detail about his mother. Ben felt a sudden rush of gratitude toward Ray, not just for the apology, but for giving his son this small gift of memory. The afternoon sun was starting to soften when Harper arrived, right on time for their planned walk. She'd traded her usual blazer for a casual cardigan, though Ben noticed she still carried her phone and a small portfolio. "I thought we could get some ice cream," Harper suggested, glancing at Eli. "There's a nice park just a few blocks away." The local ice cream shop was a neighborhood fixture, its faded awning and jingling bell unchanged for decades. Eli pressed his nose against the glass case, carefully considering all 12 flavors before choosing strawberry. Ben opted for vanilla, while Harper surprised them by picking mint chocolate chip. They found an empty bench in the small park across the street. The late afternoon light filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the ground. Eli sat between them, his feet swinging as he worked on his cone. "Ms. Harper?" he asked suddenly. "Did you plant the flowers yet? In the garden upstairs?" Harper set down her ice cream. "The rooftop garden? Not yet, but the renovations are coming along. Would you like to help choose what we plant?" Eli nodded enthusiastically, ice cream forgotten for a moment. "Can we plant yellow ones? Mommy liked yellow." "Yellow flowers would be perfect," Harper agreed. She opened her portfolio and pulled out some sketches. "Actually, I had an idea I wanted to share with both of you. We could create a special wall in the garden, not too big, just the right size for drawings and memories. A place where people could share what they remember about their loved ones." Eli's eyes grew wide. "Could I put my pictures there? The ones of Mommy?" "That's exactly what I was thinking," Harper said softly. "Would you like that?" Ben watched his son's face light up with more joy than he'd seen in months. "Yeah. Can I draw more pictures? Special ones just for the wall?" "As many as you want," Harper assured him. She turned to Ben. "What do you think?" Ben cleared his throat past a sudden tightness. "I think Ava would have loved that." They finished their ice cream as Eli chattered excitedly about his drawing plans. The sun was setting by the time they walked back to the apartment. Ben needed to get ready for his shift. Harper had arranged for him to start earlier so he could be home for Eli's morning routine. At Vale Tower, Ben changed into his uniform in the quiet of the service corridor. His phone buzzed with a text from Cammie. "Night shift safety concerns coming in through hotline. We'll review all complaints first thing tomorrow. Stay safe tonight." Ben pocketed his phone and picked up his cleaning cart, noticing how Ray gave him a respectful nod as he passed the security desk. Something had shifted, not just in his schedule, but in how people saw him. He wasn't sure yet if it was better or worse, but it was definitely different. For the first time since Ava died, he felt like someone was actually listening to their story. Not just his and Eli's, but all the night workers who kept the tower running while the city slept. He pushed his cart toward the service elevator, ready to start another shift in the quiet halls above. The Friday evening vigil at New Hope Community Church drew a larger crowd than anyone expected. Workers from Vale Tower's night shift filled the wooden pews, their faces reflecting the warm glow of candles. Pastor Ruth stood at the simple podium, her gentle voice carrying through the sanctuary. "Tonight, we gather to share our stories," she said, "and to remember those who work in the shadows to keep our city running." One by one, people came forward. A woman in her 50s, her cleaning uniform still on from her day job, spoke first. "The bus stop on 23rd Street has no lights," she said, her voice trembling. "We wait in the dark at 2 a.m., praying nothing bad happens. Some nights, I spend half my paycheck on ride shares just to feel safe." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Ben sat in the front pew beside Eli, who was drawing quietly in his notebook. From the corner of his eye, he caught movement at the back of the church. Harper Vale had slipped in, wearing simple clothes instead of her usual business attire. She stood against the wall, head bowed. A young man in maintenance coveralls stepped up next. "They schedule us different hours every week," he shared. "Can't plan childcare, can't take classes to get ahead. When we ask about it, they say we're lucky to have jobs at all." More stories followed. Tales of missed parent-teacher conferences, of sleeping through children's weekend activities, of supervisors who treated night workers as invisible. Each testimony built upon the last, painting a picture of lives lived in the margins. Mama Luz, who had been watching from her usual spot near the altar, noticed Harper in the shadows. With quiet determination, she walked down the aisle and extended her hand to the CEO. "Come," she said softly. "These are your people too." Harper hesitated, then allowed herself to be led to the front pews. Some workers stiffened at first, but Mama Luz's presence beside her seemed to ease the tension. When Ben stood to speak, the church fell silent. He pulled out Ava's worn Bible, the pages marked with her neat handwriting. "My wife." He paused, gathering strength. "My wife Ava worked nights for 15 years. She wrote in this Bible during her breaks, usually around 3 a.m. when the building was quiet." He found the page he was looking for, marked with a faded yellow sticky note. "In the margin here, she wrote something that I've been thinking about all week." She wrote, "Love is policy made public." His voice grew stronger. She believed that real change happens when we make caring for each other official. Not just something nice we do when we feel like it, but something built into the rules. Eli looked up from his drawing at the sound of his mother's words. Harper, sitting nearby, wiped a tear from her cheek. More workers came forward, but now their stories began to include moments of hope. Security guards who walked them to their cars, managers who adjusted schedules for family emergencies, co-workers who shared rides home. Through it all, Pastor Ruth nodded, acknowledging each speaker with respect. Outside, media vans had gathered, their cameras capturing something different from the scandal they'd expected. Instead of controversy, they found community. Workers of all backgrounds sat together, sharing both struggles and dreams. The image of Harper Vale sitting with night shift workers, listening intently to their stories, told a different story than the tabloid headlines. As the vigil drew to a close, Pastor Ruth led them in a simple prayer. The candlelight flickered across faces, now united in purpose rather than divided by suspicion. Later, on the church steps, Ben and Harper stood in the cool evening air. The media vans were pulling away, and workers were saying their goodbyes, heading home or to their night shifts. "Those stories," Harper said quietly. "All this time, right under our noses." Ben nodded. "Ava used to say that the building feels different at night, more honest somehow." "We need to do something," Harper said. "Something real, something lasting." She paused, then continued with determination. "What if we created a fellowship in Ava's name, not just a memorial but a program for real change?" "Like what? Policies? education funds, safety measures, everything we heard tonight made official. Would you help me draft it this weekend? Ben considered this, thinking of Ava's words about love and policy. Yes, he said. For Ava. For all of them. They arranged to meet Sunday afternoon at the church office, where Pastor Ruth had offered them space to work. As they confirmed the time, the last of the vigil's candles were being extinguished inside. But something new had been illuminated. A path forward, lit by shared purpose and the memory of a woman who believed in making love public. The Saturday morning sun streamed through Vail Tower's glass walls as Ben, Harper, and Cammy gathered in the executive conference room. Spread across the polished table were stacks of employee data, safety reports, and financial projections. Eli sat quietly in the corner with his crayons, working on another drawing. Let's start with the core of the fellowship, Harper said, her voice carrying both authority and warmth. She picked up a marker and moved to the whiteboard. What would have helped Ava most? Ben straightened in his chair, his work uniform replaced today with a clean button-down shirt. Education costs were always her biggest worry for Eli. She'd work double shifts just to put a little away each month. Cammy nodded, typing rapidly on her laptop. We could structure it as a full scholarship program for employees' children, cover everything from pre-K through college. And night workers should get priority, Ben added firmly. They sacrifice the most family time. Harper wrote, education in bold letters, then underneath. Full coverage, priority for night shift families. What about immediate safety concerns? Ben's expression grew serious. The bus stop situation is dangerous. Most nights, workers are waiting alone in the dark. And single parents like Ava, they're always rushing to relieve babysitters who charge extra after midnight. We could provide transit escorts, Cammy suggested, pulling up a spreadsheet, and childcare stipends for night shift workers. I've already calculated the costs. Harper nodded. Show me the numbers. Cammy turned her laptop around. If we include all contractors, not just direct employees, we're looking at roughly $3.2 million annually for the education fund. Transit escorts would add another $400,000. Childcare stipends. She scrolled down. About $750,000. That's significant, Harper acknowledged, but doable, especially if we redirect some of the executive bonus pool. Ben leaned forward. The contractors have to be included. They're the most vulnerable. Some companies try to save money by keeping them separate, but we won't do that, Harper interrupted firmly. This is about dignity for everyone who makes this building run. No exceptions. Cammy made more notes. We'll need at least 9 days for legal to review everything. I suggest announcing at Monday's town hall. That gives us time to get all the paperwork in order. What about the memorial aspect? Harper asked, glancing at Ben. A day of service, he said quietly. In Ava's name, where executives and management work alongside night shift staff. Really see what it's like. Harper wrote, Annual Service Day on the board. Perfect. It makes the commitment visible. Cammy looked up from her laptop. I can have draft policies ready by Wednesday. We'll need to coordinate with legal, PR, and finance, but the framework is solid. Will the board approve this? Ben asked, his voice carrying a hint of worry. Harper set down the marker. They'll have to. This isn't just good ethics, it's good business. High turnover and safety issues cost more in the long run than investing in our people. They spent the next hour refining details. Scholarship application processes, safety protocols, implementation timelines. Ben's practical experience proved invaluable, identifying potential issues they might have missed from an office perspective. As they wrapped up, Eli approached the whiteboard, studying Harper's neat handwriting. Is this all to help other mommies and daddies who work at night? Yes, Harper answered softly. And to make sure everyone remembers how special your mom was. The boy nodded solemnly, then held up his latest drawing, the Vail Tower building with stars around it. I drew the night lights so nobody has to be scared anymore. Ben squeezed his son's shoulder, emotion flickering across his face. They gathered their materials and headed for the elevator. Just before the doors closed, Eli tugged at Harper's sleeve. Miss Vail? He asked. Can the garden upstairs have a bench for Mommy to sit with the sky? The elevator began its descent, carrying them down through the heart of the building that would soon be transformed by Ava's legacy. The morning light warmed the conference room as the group worked through details. Cammie's fingers flew across her keyboard, documenting every point, while Harper wrote key items on the whiteboard in neat columns. Full tuition, books, and educational supports, Harper listed. Available to children of all employees, both direct staff and contractors. Ben nodded firmly. The contractors part is crucial. Most night shift workers aren't direct employees. Agreed, Harper said. No two-tier system. That afternoon, they presented the draft to Mama Luz and Pastor Ruth in the church office. Mama Luz studied each page carefully, her reading glasses perched on her nose. The sunlight, through stained glass windows, cast colorful patterns across the papers. "This is good work," Mama Luz said finally, looking up. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Ava would be proud to have her name on this." She reached for Ben's hand and squeezed it. "Mi-hijo, this will help so many families." Pastor Ruth leaned forward in her chair. "The fellowship application process might be overwhelming for some families. I can organize volunteers from the congregation to help people apply. We already do this for college applications." "That would be wonderful," Harper said warmly. "We want to remove every barrier we can." Monday morning brought the first small sign of change. Ben arrived at work to find his supervisor, Mike, waiting with updated schedule papers. "I've moved you to the early shift," Mike said, handing them over. 6 to 2 instead of 3 to 11. That way you can do school pickup yourself." He shifted awkwardly. "Should have done this months ago. After Ava. Sorry about that." Ben studied the new hours, throat tight with emotion. "Thank you," he managed. "This will help a lot." "Yeah, well." Mike scratched his head. "Just doing what's right." On Tuesday, Ray was doing his usual security rounds when he heard laughter from the break room. He found 3 maintenance workers huddled around a phone, snickering at something on screen. "What's so funny?" Ray asked, though his stern expression suggested he already knew. One worker quickly pocketed his phone. "Nothing, man. Just a joke." "Show me." Ray held out his hand. Reluctantly, the phone was handed over. On screen was a cruel meme about Ben and Harper, suggesting gold-digging motives. Ray deleted it immediately. "This stops now," he said firmly. "Ben Alvarez is a good man who lost his wife. His kid is hurting. You want to make jokes about that?" It was just, "No." Ray's voice was quiet but carried weight. "We're better than this. That family deserves respect. Spread that message instead." The workers looked properly chastised. Ray handed the phone back. "I better not see anything like this again." Wednesday afternoon found Eli in his counseling session, crayons scattered across the small table. The child therapist, Dr. Sarah, sat nearby as he worked intently on a drawing. "Can you tell me about your picture?" she asked gently. Eli held up the familiar image, Vale Tower with its distinctive spire and a red heart near the top. "It's where the one upstairs is," he explained. "Where Mommy used to work at night. And how do you feel when you think about that place?" Eli considered this seriously. "Sad sometimes, but also happy because Ms. Harper is making a garden there, and she's helping other mommies get home safe at night." Dr. Sarah made a note. "Those are big feelings to hold, aren't they? It's okay to feel both sad and happy." Eli nodded, adding more color to his heart. "Daddy says Mommy would like the garden, and the fellowship." He stumbled slightly over the big word. That evening, Ben and Eli stood in their small kitchen. Ben held the drawing carefully while Eli arranged the magnets just so on the fridge. "Perfect," Ben said as they stepped back to admire the artwork. "Your mom would love this one." He turned to the calendar hanging nearby and uncapped a pen. Circling next Monday's date, he wrote, "Town Hall Meeting," in clear letters. "That's when Miss Harper tells everyone about the fellowship?" Eli asked. "That's right, my Joe," Ben capped the pen. "That's when we help make things better, just like your mom would want." The calendar hung steady, the circled date a promise of change to come. The fellowship hall buzzed with the warm chatter of the Sunday congregation. Colorful dishes lined the long tables, steaming trays of enchiladas, fragrant rice, and fresh-baked rolls. The aroma of coffee and spices filled the air as people gathered in small groups, paper plates in hand. Mama Luz stood with Pastor Ruth near the dessert table, carefully arranging her homemade flan. Her eyes lit up as Ben approached with the draft proposal for the Ava Santos Fellowship. "Mijo, let me see what you and Miss Vale have created," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. Ben handed her the folder, and she adjusted her reading glasses. As she read through the pages, her expression grew more tender. "This is what love looks like on paper," she said softly. "Scholarships for the children, safe rides home for night workers, child care help." She looked up at Ben with misty eyes. Ava would be so proud of this. Pastor Ruth leaned in to study the document. "The scope is impressive, but some of our families might need help with the application process." "I was thinking about that," Ben admitted. "The forms can be overwhelming, especially for parents working long hours." "Our youth group can help," Pastor Ruth offered. "Many of them are college students themselves. They could volunteer to assist families with paperwork, maybe set up application workshops right here after Sunday service." "That would be perfect," Ben said. "Harper Miss Vale wants this to reach everyone who needs it, not just those who know how to navigate the system." Mama Luz closed the folder and pressed it to her heart. "Let me pray over this," she said. The three of them bowed their heads as her clear voice rose above the fellowship hall chatter. "Lord, bless this work of hands and hearts. Let it lift up the children, protect the workers, and honor Ava's memory. Amen." Ben hurried toward the time clock, already dreading another rushed morning of dropping Eli at before-school care. To his surprise, his supervisor, Mike, was waiting by the entrance. "Morning, Alvarez," Mike said, holding out a piece of paper. "Got your new schedule worked out?" Ben scanned the document, confusion turning to relief. His shift had been moved up by 2 hours. "This way you can do proper school drop-off," Mike explained, looking slightly uncomfortable with the kindness. "Kids need their routines, you know." "Thank you," Ben said quietly. "This means a lot." Mike just nodded and walked away. But the simple gesture stayed with Ben all morning. Ray was doing his usual security rounds when he heard snickering from the break room. He found 3 maintenance workers huddled around a phone, sharing what looked like a meme. "Man, check this out," one said. "Someone made a whole series about the janitor and the CEO." Ray stepped closer and caught a glimpse of the cruel image before speaking up. "Delete it. Now." The workers jumped, trying to hide the phone. "But it's just a joke," one started to say. "No, it's harassment," Ray cut in firmly. "And it stops right now. That man's little boy lost his mother. How would you feel if someone was mocking your family's grief?" The break room fell silent. The worker with the phone slowly pulled it out and deleted the image. "Thank you," Ray said. "Now spread the word. This kind of disrespect won't fly here anymore. We're better than that." Wednesday, 4:00 p.m., Children's Counseling Center. Eli sat at the low table in the cheerful counseling room, colored markers spread before him. His counselor, Ms. Sarah, watched as he carefully drew a familiar image, the tall building reaching toward the sky. "Can you tell me about your drawing?" she asked gently. "It's where Mama used to work," Eli said, adding a bright red heart near the top. "And where the one upstairs lives." "The one upstairs? Ms. Harper," Eli explained, coloring the heart carefully. "She's helping make things better, like Mommy said she would." Ms. Sarah nodded encouragingly. "How does it make you feel when you draw this building?" Eli thought for a moment, his small face serious. "Safe," he finally said, "because people are taking care of things up there. And sad, too, because I miss Mommy. But Miss Harper said it's okay to feel both things at the same time." Wednesday, 8:00 p.m., Alvarez Kitchen. The kitchen was warm and bright as Ben helped Eli tape his latest drawing to the refrigerator. It joined several others, a growing gallery of tall buildings with hearts, each one slightly different but carrying the same hope. "Look, Daddy." Eli pointed to his newest creation. "I made the heart bigger this time." "It's beautiful, Mijo," Ben said, smoothing down the tape. He turned to the calendar hanging nearby and picked up a pen. Finding next Monday's date, he drew a careful circle around it. "Is that when we get to see Miss Harper again?" Eli asked, watching his father mark the date. "Yes, That's the special meeting day, Ben confirmed, capping the pen. He studied the circled date, feeling the weight of all it represented, not just for him and Eli, but for every night worker and their families. The auditorium at Vale Tower hummed with anticipation. Rows of chairs filled quickly as employees from every department filed in. Maintenance staff in their dark blue uniforms, office workers in business casual, and contractors in their various company logos. The excitement was palpable. Harper Vale stood backstage, reviewing her notes one final time. Her normally steady hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her blazer. Kami approached with a tablet, her face tight with concern. "Harper, we need to talk. Now." They stepped into a small prep room where Kami closed the door carefully behind them. The preliminary results came in early. There's a partial genetic match." Harper's face went pale. "That's impossible. It's not a full match, but it's enough to raise questions. Legal is already in crisis mode." Kami's fingers flew across her tablet. They're pulling hospital records, trying to understand. The door burst open as Jared Klein strode in, his normally polished demeanor showing cracks of barely contained panic. "Cancel the announcement. Now." "We can't," Harper said firmly. "There are over 300 people out there, including press." "Then stick to the script about building safety initiatives. No fellowship announcement, no mentions of the Santos family." Jared ran a hand through his silver hair. "The board is convening in 20 minutes. This could tank our stock before closing bell." Harper's phone buzzed with urgent messages from PR. She glanced at the screen and felt her stomach drop. Somehow, the genetic results had already leaked. Social media was exploding with speculation. "I need to tell Ben before he sees it online," Harper said, moving toward the door. Jared stepped in front of her. "You will do no such thing. Legal needs to control all communication now. One wrong word could expose us to massive liability." In the auditorium, Ben sat in the front row with Eli beside him, the boy's legs swinging excitedly as he clutched a new drawing. Neither noticed the growing commotion in the back of the room as people checked their phones. Kami's tablet pinged with an alert. Her eyes widened as she scanned the hospital database results. "Harper, 7 years ago, during the city's bone marrow shortage, you were a registered donor." "Yes, I've been registered since college, but I never knew who received." Harper's voice trailed off as the implications hit her. Ava Santos received an emergency infusion during her first round of treatment. Kami showed her the records. "The dates match. Your marrow saved her life back then." "That explains the partial match," Harper whispered. "But the press won't understand the nuance. They'll twist this into—" Right on cue, Jared's phone lit up with a breaking news alert. He thrust it in front of them, showing the sensational headline, "DNA link? CEO kinship? The board meeting starts in 10 minutes, he snapped. "And you better have a damn good explanation for how this turned into a PR nightmare." Outside, they could hear the confused murmur of the crowd growing louder as the news spread through the audience. Phones chimed with notifications. Reporters who had come for a simple corporate announcement began frantically calling their editors. Harper pressed her hands against her temples. "We need to protect Eli from this circus. He's already been through so much." "Protect the company first," Jared countered. "We're looking at potential shareholder lawsuits if this isn't handled properly. The board will want blood." Kami was already drafting crisis communications. "I'll have HR start documenting everything. The original DNA test request, the privacy protocols, the hospital records. We need a clear timeline showing there was no prior knowledge of any connection." Through the backstage curtain, Harper could see Ben checking his phone with growing concern. Her heart ached, knowing the storm that was about to engulf him and Eli. "Get Ben out of there," she told Kami. "Use the service elevator. Take them home before the media swarms the lobby." But it was too late. Reporters were already positioning themselves at every exit, cameras ready. Their phones would be ringing non-stop within minutes. The PR team rushed in with drafted statements and crisis plans. Words like optics and damage control filled the air. Harper barely heard them, watching Ben guide Eli toward a side door as curious whispers followed them. Later that evening, Ben sat in his living room, the TV muted but still showing the breaking news chyron. Eli was in his room doing homework, thankfully unaware of the media frenzy. The phone buzzed again, another unknown number. Another reporter hoping for a quote. Ben declined the call, adding it to the growing list of blocked numbers. He stared at Ava's Bible on the coffee table, remembering her quiet strength during her illness. Had she known about the marrow donation? Was that why she wrote the note about the one upstairs? The truth was there in the medical records. Harper's selfless gift had given them 7 more precious years with Ava. But now that truth was being twisted into something ugly and sensational. Ben turned off his phone completely, not wanting to see another headline or receive another call. Outside, a news van crawled past their building for the 3rd time that hour. Ben drew the curtains closed, protecting their small sanctuary of peace for as long as he could. In Eli's room, he could hear the soft scratch of crayons as his son worked on yet another drawing, blissfully unaware of how their world was about to change. The TV continued its silent parade of headlines and photos. Harper's corporate headshot, the Vail Tower logo, old pictures of Ava from her social media. Ben reached for the remote, not wanting Eli to walk in and see his mother's face being used for this circus. As he pressed the power button, one final headline scrolled across the screen. Vail Board calls emergency session, CEO's future in question. Kami's hand shook as she held the phone, her eyes wide with disbelief. The lab technician's voice crackled through the speaker, explaining the preliminary findings in clinical terms that made her stomach twist. A genetic overlap between Harper Vail and Eli Alvarez. Not a full match, but enough to send shockwaves through Vail Tower. "Are you absolutely certain?" Kami asked, scribbling notes frantically. "This could change everything." The moment she hung up, her office door burst open. 3 members of the legal team rushed in, their faces ashen. Behind them, PR Director Marcus Chen clutched his tablet like a shield. "We need to contain this," the head lawyer said, already pulling out confidentiality forms. "If this leaks before we understand what it means, too late," Marcus interrupted, turning his tablet around. Social media was already lighting up with speculation. Someone at the lab had talked. Kami's phone buzzed again, Jared Klein's name flashing on the screen. "Emergency board meeting. Now." His voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "And? Get Vail up here." The next hour became a blur of raised voices and frantic activity. The boardroom filled with executives in expensive suits, their faces grim as they reviewed the preliminary findings. Harper sat at the head of the table, her usual composure cracking at the edges. "This is absurd," she said, her voice tight. "I never even met Ava Santos." "The public won't care about 'never met,'" Marcus warned, scrolling through his phone. "They see genetic link. They assume scandal. We're already trending." Jared Klein paced the length of the room, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. "This could tank our stock before the market closes. We need a statement, something definitive." "What we need," Kami interrupted, "is to understand how this is possible." She had been digging through Harper's medical records with permission, searching for answers. Her eyes caught something on her screen. "Wait, Harper, did you register as a bone marrow donor 10 years ago?" The room went silent. Harper's face changed as memory struck. "Yes, after James died. I wanted to help someone else live." Kami's fingers flew across her keyboard. 3 years ago, there was an emergency donation needed at Metro General. The recipient's name is redacted, but... She looked up. "The timing matches when Ava was sick. Are you saying Vail donated marrow to this janitor's wife without knowing it?" Jared's voice dripped with skepticism. "Bone marrow donation can cause genetic material to appear in blood tests," one of the lawyers offered. "It's called microchimerism. We could explain." "Twitter won't wait for scientific explanations," Marcus cut in. His phone kept buzzing with notifications. "Look." The headline splashed across screens throughout the room. "DNA link? CO kinship?" Below it, photos of Harper kneeling with Eli in the lobby spread like wildfire. Jared slammed his hand on the table. "This ends now. Vail, you'll take a leave of absence while we investigate. We'll release a statement about temporary leadership." "No." Harper's voice was steel. I won't abandon that child, or his father, to your damage control. This isn't about them anymore, Jared snapped. This is about protecting Vale Industries from scandal. Kami watched as Harper stood slowly, her spine straight as a sword. Everything about this is about them, about every worker who cleans these floors at night, every parent struggling to keep their children safe. She turned to Kami. Find those hospital records. All of them. If I donated marrow that helped Ava, I want proof. The day spiraled into chaos. News vans circled the building like sharks. Employees huddled around their phones, sharing links and whispers. Kami worked frantically with hospital administrators, trying to untangle confidentiality regulations and medical records. By evening, the story had exploded across every major network. In the Alvarez living room, Ben sat on his worn couch, staring at the TV in disbelief. The headline crawler seemed to mock him. Vale Tower scandal deepens, CEO's DNA, links to employee's child. Eli played with his toys on the carpet, blissfully unaware of the storm surrounding him. When his voice appeared in a video clip from the lobby, Ben quickly grabbed the remote and turned the volume down. His phone buzzed again, the fifth unknown number in the past hour. Reporters, all of them, hungry for comment. Ben ignored the call, watching his son instead. Eli hummed softly as he drew another picture of the tall building with its heart on top, safe in his small world of crayons and hope, while the adult world spun into chaos around him. Poppy? Eli looked up from his drawing. Can we have dinner now? Ben managed a smile, pushing down his worry. Sure, mijo. Let's see what Abuela left us in the fridge. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was Harper's number, but Ben let it go to voicemail. He needed time to think, to protect his son, to understand what this all meant. In the kitchen, he could still hear the muted TV anchors discussing his family's life like breaking news, but he focused instead on warming up Mama Luz's enchiladas and listening to Eli chat about his day at school. Some truths, he decided, would have to wait until morning. For now, his job was to keep Eli's world stable, even as everything else threatened to collapse. At the hospital records office, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Harper and Kami pored over the documents. The records liaison, a kind-faced woman named Mrs. Pruce Chen, pulled up the electronic files that confirmed what seemed impossible. Harper Vale had indeed been a bone marrow donor years ago. Here it is, Mrs. Chen said, turning her monitor. You registered 8 years ago during a donor drive, and this emergency donation matches the timeline of Mrs. Santos's hospitalization. Harper sank into her chair, her usually perfect posture crumpling. The weight of understanding settled over her like a heavy blanket. This explained the partial genetic match, not parentage, but an accidental connection through a life-saving gift. Back at Vale Tower, the news spread like wildfire, despite their best efforts at containment. By afternoon, Harper's phone buzzed constantly, with calls from board members and reporters. She ignored them all, instead dialing the one number that mattered most right now. Mama Luz? Harper's voice trembled. I need to pray with you. There was a pause on the other end. Then Mama Luz's warm voice filled the line. Of course, mihija. Tell me what troubles your heart. Harper's carefully maintained composure cracked. They found a genetic link between Eli and me. But it's not what everyone thinks. I was a bone marrow donor, years ago, during Ava's illness. I never knew who received it, and now— Shh, Mama Luz soothed. God works in ways we cannot see. Let us pray together. As Mama Luz's gentle Spanish prayer filled her ear, Harper felt tears sliding down her cheeks. The prayer spoke of truth, of light breaking through darkness, of wisdom in times of confusion. Later that afternoon, Pastor Ruth arrived at Vale Tower, her practical shoes squeaking on the marble floors. She found Harper in her office, staring out the window at the city below. The truth wants to be told, Pastor Ruth said without preamble. All of it, in the light. Harper turned, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. The board is already spinning this as a conflict of interest. They're saying I knew about the connection and hid it. Then tell them you didn't know. But more importantly, let others speak their truth too. Pastor Ruth sat down, her presence steady and grounding. The night workers have stories that need telling. Stories about Ava, about working in shadows, about dignity denied. Let them testify. The shareholders' meeting is Tuesday, Harper said. Jared's pushing for a no-confidence vote. Perfect timing, Pastor Ruth replied. Truth speaks loudest when power tries to silence it. As they talked strategy, Ben arrived for his shift. Pastor Ruth waved him in, and they gathered around Harper's desk, the CEO, the janitor, and the pastor, planning truth-telling in the face of corporate machinery. We need you there, Ben, Pastor Ruth said. Your voice matters most in this. Ben rubbed his tired eyes. What about Eli? The press will be brutal. Mama Luz can keep him safe at home, Pastor Ruth assured him. This is about more than just the genetic link now. It's about every parent working nights, every child waiting for them to come home safe. Harper's phone lit up with another board message. She silenced it without looking. They'll try to discredit everything we've built. The fellowship, the safety policies, all of it. Then we build it again, Ben said quietly. But this time, with truth as the foundation. As evening settled over the city, they moved their discussion to the church courtyard. The old stone walls provided privacy, and the garden's peace helped calm their nerves as they refined their plan. Ben finally nodded, his decision made. I'll speak at the shareholders' meeting. They need to hear what it's really like down here in the trenches. After Ben left for his shift, Harper remained in the courtyard with Pastor Ruth. The streetlights cast long shadows across the prayer garden as they sat on a weathered wooden bench. Are you ready to tell the whole story? Pastor Ruth asked. About being a donor? About why you registered in the first place? Harper took a deep breath, thinking of the donor drive 8 years ago, of signing up because it felt like the right thing to do. She hadn't known then that her marrow would flow into Ava's veins, creating this microscopic bridge between them all. Yes, she said finally, it's time for the whole truth. About the marrow, about the night shifts, about everything we've tried to hide in darkness. Pastor Ruth squeezed her hand. Remember, truth isn't just facts. It's the story those facts tell about who we are and what we value. As darkness settled fully over the courtyard, Harper felt a strange peace replace her earlier panic. The path ahead was clear, even if it wasn't easy. Tuesday's shareholder meeting loomed, but she was ready to stand in her truth, not just for herself, but for Eli, for Ben, for Ava's memory, and for every worker who deserved to be seen in the light. The fluorescent lights of Vail Tower's conference room cast a harsh glow over the stack of papers spread across the table. Cammy sat with her reading glasses perched on her nose, carefully reading through each handwritten statement from the night shift workers. Her highlighter moved steadily across the pages as she noted recurring themes. Listen to this one, she said, lifting a page. I've worked here 15 years. 3 times I've been followed to my car. The parking garage lights are always out on level B2. When we ask for escorts, they say we're being dramatic. She placed it in a growing pile labeled Security Concerns. Harper stood at the whiteboard, making notes as Cammy read. Her blazer was draped over a chair, sleeves rolled up as she worked. How many similar reports do we have? 27, just about the parking garage, Cammy replied, shuffling through papers. And here's another pattern, bus stop safety. She picked up another statement. My shift ends at 2 a.m. The closest bus stop has no shelter, no light. I spend 30 minutes standing in the dark praying nothing happens. In the corner of the room, Eli sat at a small table, his colored pencils scattered around him. His tongue stuck out slightly as he concentrated on his drawing. The scratch of his pencils provided a gentle backdrop to the serious work happening at the main table. Ben entered with 3 cups of coffee, setting them down carefully. How's it going? We're organizing everything by theme, Cammy explained. Transportation safety, workplace harassment, schedule impacts on families. She gestured to the carefully labeled piles. I'm removing names where requested, but keeping job titles and length of service for context. Harper stepped back from the whiteboard, which was now covered in neat columns of data. These aren't just complaints, she said quietly. These are stories of people trying to support their families with dignity. Stories like Ava's. Ben picked up one of the statements, his face tightening as he read. This could have been her, he said softly. Same route home, same fears. Eli looked up from his drawing. Are you helping other mommies get home safe? The simple question hung in the air, cutting through the complexity of their task. Harper walked over to see what he was drawing. On his paper, a tall building reached toward the top of the page, decorated with tiny windows. At the very top, he had carefully drawn a large heart, coloring it in red. Below it, in wobbly capital letters, he wrote, "The one upstairs." "May I see?" Harper asked gently. Eli nodded, pushing the drawing toward her. "It's where Mommy used to work," he explained. "The heart is where the good people are supposed to be." Harper's eyes met Ben's across the room. The message was clear. This was about more than defending against rumors or protecting reputations. It was about living up to that simple child's faith in the power of those upstairs to help. Turning back to the conference table, Harper began sorting through her speech notes. "We need to show the shareholders that compassion isn't weakness, it's our strength. These aren't just policy changes we're proposing. This is about who we are as a company." Kami nodded, adding another statement to a pile. "I've highlighted key quotes we could use, anonymous ones only. Real voices telling real stories." They worked through the afternoon, crafting a presentation that wove together data and humanity. Harper practiced sections of her speech, while Ben and Kami offered feedback. The sun began to sink, casting long shadows through the windows. "The true measure of our company isn't in our stock price," Harper rehearsed, standing at the front of the room. "It's in how we treat our most vulnerable workers. It's in whether we see humanity in every person who helps build our success, whether they work in the daylight or the dark." "That's it," Ben said quietly. "That's the heart of it." As evening approached, they moved to the rooftop garden. Construction materials for Ava's bench lay waiting, covered in tarps. The city spread out below them, office lights beginning to twinkle on in the dusk. Ben touched the tarp gently. "This is where it started." Eli's note about the one upstairs. Harper stood beside him, looking out over the city. "I won't resign," she said firmly. "Not when we're so close to real change." "Agreed," Ben replied. "Let them look at what we're building, not what the rumors are destroying." He paused, then added, "Let them choose our fruit over their fears." The evening air was growing cool as they stood in the unfinished garden. Below them, the first night shift workers would be arriving, signing in, beginning their quiet work of keeping the building running. Tomorrow, they would face the shareholders with truth and testimony. But for now, in the gentle dusk, they stood in silent agreement. This was the right path, whatever came next. On the table behind them, Eli's drawing caught the last light of day, the heart at the top of his skyscraper glowing red against the darkening sky. Harper's apartment felt unusually quiet as she stepped inside, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors. The space was meticulously organized, every surface gleaming, a reflection of her need for control. But tonight, something felt different. The carefully maintained order seemed more like a shield than comfort. She set her briefcase down and walked to the shelf where David's photo had sat face down for 3 years. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for the silver frame. Dust had gathered on its back, marking the time she'd spent avoiding his smile. "I don't know what you'd say about all this," she whispered, turning the frame over. David's warm eyes looked back at her, his grin casual and natural at their favorite beach. He'd always been better at letting his guard down, at showing his heart openly. Harper traced the edge of the frame, then deliberately placed it upright on the shelf. The motion felt like unlocking a door she'd kept firmly shut. She sank onto her cream-colored couch, her usual perfect posture crumbling as the emotions she'd held back began to surface. "I'm trying to do the right thing," she said to the photo, her voice cracking. "But everything I do to help seems to make it worse." A tear slipped down her cheek, then another. Years of maintained composure began to dissolve as she covered her face with her hands. The sudden ring of her phone startled her. Mama Luz's name appeared on the screen. Harper quickly tried to steady her voice before answering. "Hello? Mihija?" Mama Luz's warm voice came through, using the tender term she'd begun calling Harper. "I was just finishing my evening prayers, and I felt I should call you." Harper wiped her eyes, touched by the timing. "Thank you. I was just." She glanced at David's photo. I was having a moment of doubt. Mama Luz hummed knowingly. Those moments are when we most need to remember we're not alone. There was a soft, rustling sound, like pages turning. Would you pray with me? Yes, Harper whispered, closing her eyes. Mama Luz's voice grew gentle but firm. Lord, we come to you with our fears and our hopes. We ask for strength to speak truth with love, to stand firm in what is right. Be with Harper tomorrow, as she faces those who would twist good into suspicion. Be with Ben, as he guards his pride and his son's heart. And be with our Eli, who sees with such clear eyes what we adults sometimes miss. Harper felt more tears falling, but these felt different, cleansing rather than desperate. Amen, she managed to say. Harper, Mama Luz continued, remember this, tell the truth, plain, and let love do its work. That's all any of us can do. But what if it's not enough? Harper asked, voicing her deepest fear. Mihija, love is always enough when we let it work in the light. Mama Luz's voice carried absolute conviction. Now, dry those tears and get some rest. Tomorrow needs your strength, not your fear. Across town, in the Alvarez apartment, Ben sat on the edge of Eli's bed. The boy's room was half-packed, boxes stacked neatly in one corner, but Eli seemed focused only on the folder in his hands. Can you make sure Miss Harper shows this tomorrow? He asked, holding out his drawing from earlier. It's important. Ben took the folder carefully. Of course, mijo. But why is it so important? Eli sat up in bed, his Batman pajamas rumpled. Because it shows the truth about the one upstairs. His small face was serious. Mommy always said the truth is like a light, it helps people see better. Ben's throat tightened. Even now, Ava's wisdom came through their son's simple words. That's right, buddy. That's exactly right. He tucked the folder safely into his bag for tomorrow. Daddy? Eli's voice was getting sleepy. Are we really going to move away? I don't know yet, Ben answered honestly. But whatever happens, we're going to be okay. I promise. I know, Eli yawned, because we have help now. Miss Harper and Mama Luz and Pastor Ruth and everybody. Ben leaned down to kiss his son's forehead. That's right. We're not alone. Once Eli's breathing had evened into sleep, Ben walked to the kitchen window. The city lights spread out before him, Vale Tower standing tall in the distance. His hand found the small cross he wore under his shirt, Ava's, given to him after she passed. In her penthouse apartment, Harper stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the same night sky. David's photo sat beside her, face up and catching the city lights. Two voices, separated by miles but united in purpose, whispered into the darkness. Help us. The words hung in the night air, a prayer and a plea, as the city hummed below and the stars wheeled silently overhead. The Vale Tower Conference Center buzzed with tension as shareholders filed in, their murmurs echoing off the wood-paneled walls. Morning sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, catching the dust motes that danced in the air. At the front of the room, Jared Klein stood at the podium, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his navy suit pressed to perfection. Ladies and gentlemen, Jared began, his voice smooth as polished marble, we face a critical moment regarding our brand integrity. He paused, scanning the room with practiced concern. Recent events have cast shadows on Vale Tower's reputation. As stewards of this company's future, we must address these complications. Harper sat in the front row, her spine straight, hands folded carefully in her lap. Ben sat 3 seats away, his work uniform replaced by a clean white shirt and his best tie. Between them, Cammie held a folder containing their evidence. When Jared finished his opening remarks, Harper rose and walked to the podium. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor, steady, determined steps. She placed her notes down but didn't look at them. Thank you, Mr. Klein, she said, her voice clear and strong. I'd like to start with facts. She nodded to Cammie, who advanced to the first slide. 8 years ago, I registered as a bone marrow donor. During a hospital shortage that coincided with Ava Santos's illness, I provided an emergency infusion. The screen showed official hospital documentation. Harper continued, our medical team can explain the science of microchimerism, how cellular material can persist between donor and recipient. This explains the partial genetic overlap noted in recent tests. It does not indicate parentage. Murmurs rippled through the room. Harper held up Ava's note, now carefully preserved in a plastic sleeve. This note has been the subject of much speculation. It reads, "Tell Eli the one upstairs is like a father to this city." She paused, letting the words sink in. These weren't words hiding a secret. They were a moral charge to leadership, to anyone with power in this building. To be like a father to this city means to protect, to nurture, to ensure safety and dignity for all. She gestured to the back of the room, where Maria Rodriguez, a night shift worker, stood. Maria walked to the microphone set up in the aisle, her hands shaking slightly as she unfolded her statement. "I worked the night shift with Ava for 3 years," Maria began, her voice growing stronger. "We shared bus rides home at 4 a.m., pepper spray in our pockets, praying for safety. When my son was sick, Ava covered my shift. She said we had to look out for each other because nobody else would." Ray stepped forward next, his security uniform crisp and professional. "I've watched our night staff dodge harassment at bus stops, rush through dark parking lots, miss their kids' school events because of impossible schedules. I stayed silent too long. We can do better." Ben rose slowly from his seat. His hands were steady as he approached the microphone. The room grew completely still. "I let pride keep me from accepting help when my wife was sick," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I let fear keep me quiet about unsafe conditions. I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking for policy, for changes that protect all workers, especially those you never see because they clean your offices while you sleep." Kami advanced to the final slide. Eli's drawing filled the screen, a skyscraper with a heart on the highest floor, the one upstairs, written in careful child's letters. Harper turned back to the shareholders, her voice soft but carrying to every corner. "Power that shelters is the only kind worth keeping." The room fell silent. Then a woman in the third row wiped her eyes. A man in an expensive suit cleared his throat repeatedly. The murmurs began to swell, carrying notes of sympathy and support. Jared stepped forward, his composure slightly ruffled. "I move that we proceed to a vote," he announced, but his usual authority had dimmed beneath the weight of truth spoken in the light. From his seat in the back row, Eli clutched Mama Luz's hand as the shareholders raised their hands one by one. The room fell silent as the company secretary tallied the votes, the scratch of her pen the only sound in the tense atmosphere. "The results are in," the secretary announced, her voice clear and steady. "With a 68% majority, the shareholders have voted to retain Ms. Percent Vale as CEO and expand the proposed Ava Santos Fellowship Program." A collective exhale swept through the room. Harper stood tall at the podium, her shoulders straight, but her eyes glistening. "Thank you for choosing compassion over fear," she said, her voice carrying to every corner. "Now, let's make this mean something real." Jared's face tightened as the secretary continued reading the approved measures. The board's oversight would now include a new ethics committee with dedicated seats for workers and community representatives. His grip on the armrest whitened as his authority diminished with each announcement. Ben sat up straighter when Harper called his name. "Mr. Alvarez reminded us that real change must include everyone who makes this building run," she said. "He was right. So today, I'm inviting all our contract partners to join us in signing the Night Shift Dignity Accord." She gestured to a table where Kami had laid out multiple copies of the document. "This accord guarantees child care stipends for night workers, safe transit escorts, fair overtime policies, and secure facilities for all staff, regardless of who signs their paycheck." The CEO of Premier Cleaning Services, Vale Tower's largest contractor, stood first. "We're in," he said, walking to the front. 3 more vendor CEOs followed, their pens scratching signatures onto the papers as cameras flashed. Kami stepped forward with a tablet, her efficiency showing even in this emotional moment. "Implementation begins immediately," she announced. "Phase 1 rolls out next week, with locker upgrades and transit partnerships. Childcare stipends start the following pay period." In the back row, Mama Luz whispered a prayer of thanks. Pastor Ruth squeezed her shoulder gently. Ben found himself called to the front, where Harper publicly thanked him for his courage and insight. Mr. Alvarez showed us that dignity isn't a gift from above, it's a right that belongs to everyone who makes this company work, she said. The applause that followed felt genuine, not polite. As the formal meeting concluded, Harper gestured to Ben and Eli. "Would you join me upstairs? There's something I'd like to show you." They took the elevator to the rooftop garden. The spring air was crisp and clean this high up, the city spreading out below them in a maze of streets and buildings. Construction materials marked the spot where Ava's bench would soon be placed. Eli ran his hand along the smooth stone foundation. "Will Mommy be able to see the whole city from here?" "She sure will, Maijo," Ben said softly, his voice rough with emotion. Harper stood with them in the sunshine, all three taking deep breaths of the fresh air. The weight of the past weeks seemed to lift slightly with each exhale. Their grief remained. It always would. But now it was tinged with something that felt like hope. They stood together in comfortable silence, looking out over the city Ava had loved, the building she had helped care for, the future they would build in her memory. The spring breeze carried the scent of new flowers from the planters nearby, promising growth and renewal. The CEO of Premier Cleaning Services, Vail Tower's largest contractor, walked to the table and picked up a pen. "We're signing," he announced. "Our workers deserve this." 3 more contractor companies followed suit, their representatives forming a line at the signing table. Cammy moved efficiently through the crowd with folders and schedules. "We'll start manager training tomorrow morning," she told Harper. "I've already prepared the implementation guidelines." In the back of the room, Ben watched as more companies joined the line. Ray, the security guard who had become an unexpected ally, leaned over. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "No more workers walking alone to dark bus stops at midnight." Harper made her way through the dispersing crowd to where Ben sat with Eli and Mama Luz. "Mr. Alvarez, could we talk privately for a moment?" In a quiet corner of the room, Harper laid out her proposal. "We need someone who understands both the practical and human sides of night work," she explained. "I'd like to offer you the position of Facilities Safety Coordinator. You'd design shift schedules, oversee security improvements, and serve as a liaison to the Ethics Committee." Ben's expression remained careful. "What are the hours?" "You'd work mainly days, 8:00 to 4:00, with some flexible evening hours for checking on night operations, but never past 8:00 p.m., Harper assured him. "You'd be home for dinner with Eli, make Sunday services, handle school drop-off and pickup." Relief softened Ben's features. "Yes," he said simply, "I accept." The next morning, Cammy stood before a room of department managers, pointing to a PowerPoint slide. "The stipend forms must be processed within 48 hours, she emphasized. "Night workers can't wait weeks for child care reimbursement." In the front row, Ray took detailed notes. After the session, he gathered the younger security guards. "Listen up," he said. "We're doing role-play scenarios on respectful interactions. Every worker who comes through those doors deserves dignity, no matter their shift or position." By Wednesday afternoon, the changes were already visible. The HR office hummed with activity as workers submitted their first round of stipend applications. Cammy's team processed them efficiently, sending approval notifications before the end of the day. That evening, Ben sat in his new office, reviewing security footage of the building's entry points and marking areas that needed better lighting. On his desk sat a framed photo of Eli and a stack of worker schedule requests. Each one represented a parent trying to balance work with family life. At 11:00 p.m., the new escort system went into effect. Security guards accompanied small groups of workers to well-lit bus stops and parking areas. The night shift supervisor reported 0 incidents, a marked improvement from previous weeks. Thursday morning brought more progress. Cammy's inbox filled with positive feedback from workers using the new services. "Child attended first dental appointment in years. Thank you for the stipend." Read one message. "Finally got 8 hours of sleep knowing my kids were safe at daycare," said another. Ray spent his afternoon shift training 2 new guards. "See how she's carrying cleaning supplies?" he demonstrated. "Offer to hold the door before she struggles with it. Small gestures of respect make a big difference." By Thursday evening, Ben had settled into his role. He moved through the building with purpose, checking in with workers, noting concerns, and ensuring the new policies were being followed. The night shift workers greeted him differently now, not as one of them anymore, but still trusted, still their advocate. At 10:15 p.m., Ben sat at his kitchen table, his laptop open to a draft email to Harper. Mama Luz placed a cup of chamomile tea beside him while he detailed his proposals for locker room security upgrades. "The card readers are good," he typed, "but we need better lighting in the basement corridor and cameras covering the locker area entrances. I've attached cost estimates and 3 vendor options." From the hallway, he could hear Eli's steady breathing from his bedroom. For the first time since Ava's death, his son slept without tossing and turning. The nightlight cast a gentle glow under the door. "He's sleeping better," Mama Luz observed softly, sitting across from Ben. "No nightmares this week." Ben nodded, adding final touches to his email. The quiet felt different now, not heavy with worry, but peaceful. Outside, the city buses ran their routes, carrying workers home under newly installed streetlights, while inside Vale Tower, the night shift began their work with dignity. Morning sunlight glinted off the newly installed glass panels that sheltered the rooftop garden from the wind. The space had been transformed over the past weeks. Neat paths wound between raised flower beds, bursting with colorful blooms. In the center, Ava's bench stood waiting, its polished wood gleaming. About 30 people gathered in a loose semicircle around the bench. Ben stood with Eli, pressed close to his side, both wearing their Sunday best. Mama Luz dabbed at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. Harper Vale, for once not in her usual blazer but in a simple blue dress, waited quietly beside them. The garden's transformation mirrored the changes below. Night shift workers now moved through well-lit corridors with security escorts. The child care stipend program was running smoothly. Ben's new position as facility safety coordinator had already led to improved schedules and safer conditions. Pastor Ruth stepped forward, her gray hair catching the morning light. She rested one hand on the bench's smooth wood. "We gather today to dedicate this place of peace and remembrance," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the garden. "This bench honors Ava Santos, whose love for her family sparked changes that will protect countless others." She gestured to the small brass plaque mounted on the bench's back. Its words caught the light. "Love is policy made public." Mama Luz moved forward, her Bible open in her steady hands. Her voice was strong and clear as she read, "Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning." She closed the Bible and looked up at the gathered crowd. Psalm 30, verse 5. Ava knew this truth. She worked through the night so her son could wake to better mornings. Eli stepped forward then, clutching his latest drawing. Harper had arranged for a special clear frame to be mounted on the bench's back panel. With careful movements, Eli slid his artwork into place. A colorful rendering of Vale Tower, with a bright heart near the top and careful block letters spelling out "The One Upstairs." Ben helped him secure it, his hands gentle as they closed the frame. The drawing would be protected from the elements while remaining visible to anyone who came to sit and reflect. Harper moved to stand beside the bench. For a moment, she simply looked out at the gathered faces: night shift workers, security staff, cleaning crews, office employees, all together in the morning light. When she spoke, her voice carried raw emotion that she no longer tried to hide. "3 months ago, a little boy asked me to bring his mother back," she said, meeting Eli's eyes with gentle acknowledgement. "I couldn't do that. None of us can. But together, we've found a way to honor Ava's memory by protecting other parents who work through the night." She paused, drawing a steadying breath. "This bench is more than a memorial. It's a promise. A promise that every worker deserves to return safely to their family. A promise that dignity isn't a privilege, it's a right. We couldn't bring one mother back," her voice caught slightly, "but together we can help others get safely home." From the street below, choir voices drifted up. The church choir was practicing for Sunday service. The hymn floated on the morning air, lending an unexpected grace to the moment. Eli tugged gently at Harper's dress. "Can we pray?" he asked, his voice clear in the quiet garden. Harper nodded, emotion plain on her face. Ben stepped forward, and the three of them joined hands beside the bench. Around them, others bowed their heads, united in a moment of profound connection. The sun warmed their shoulders as they stood together, the choir's voices rising up from below, while the city stretched out around them, not divided into upstairs and downstairs anymore, but united in the morning light. Ray, the security guard, stood near the garden entrance, watching over the gathering with quiet pride. Cammy wiped tears from her cheeks, her ever-present tablet set aside for once. Pastor Ruth's face held a gentle smile as she observed the three figures holding hands by the bench, CEO, father and child, brought together by loss, but united by hope. The choir's voices swelled, carrying notes of joy and promise up to the rooftop garden where Ava's memory would live on, not just in the bench that bore her name, but in the policies and protections that would shield other families from similar grief. In that moment, as Ben, Harper, and Eli stood with clasped hands beside Ava's bench, the morning sun turned the glass and steel of Vale Tower into something warmer, something more human. The building wasn't just a workplace anymore. It had become a testament to the power of compassion made public, of love transformed into action. Pastor Ruth stepped forward, her gray hair catching the morning light. She rested one hand on the bench's smooth wood as she began the dedication ceremony. The gathered crowd, a mix of night shift workers, day staff, and families, drew closer. "This garden," Pastor Ruth said, her voice carrying across the rooftop, "is more than a memorial. It's a promise kept." Harper nodded, thinking of that first morning when Eli had asked about making a place to remember his mom. Now, 3 months later, she watched as Ben stepped up to the podium with a folder tucked under his arm. In his new role as Facilities Safety Coordinator, he had transformed from night janitor to respected leader. "Good morning," Ben began, his voice steady. "I'd like to share our first monthly safety report." He opened the folder and smiled slightly. "In just 30 days, we've seen a 40% reduction in reported safety incidents during night shifts. The new escort system has a 100% participation rate. Our first round of child care stipends went out to 35 families last week." A ripple of appreciative murmurs went through the crowd. Ray, the security guard who had become one of their strongest advocates, gave a thumbs up from his position near the door. "The pilot program for improved bus stop lighting has been funded," Ben continued. "Installation begins next week at the 5 stops most used by our night shift workers. And thanks to our maintenance team's overtime efforts, the new secure lockers will be fully installed by month's end." Harper watched faces in the crowd, parents who could now afford better childcare, workers who no longer had to walk dark streets alone, families who could breathe a little easier. This was what power should do, she thought. This was love made public. After Ben finished his report, Mama Luz stepped forward with Eli. Together, they unveiled the small bronze plaque on Ava's bench. The words caught the sunlight. "Love is policy made public." Eli traced the letters with his finger, then looked up at Harper. "Can I show everyone my new drawing?" Harper nodded, and Ben helped Eli pin a fresh artwork to the display board they'd installed. It showed the Vale Tower with flowers growing all the way up its sides, reaching toward a smiling sun. As the formal ceremony concluded, people lingered in the garden. Harper stayed, stacking chairs and learning names she should have known years ago. She met Maria's twins, who helped their mother clean the 42nd floor. She learned that Jerome, who managed night security, had a daughter starting college next fall, their first fellowship recipient. The afternoon mellowed into evening. Most guests had departed, but Harper found herself sitting on Ava's bench beside Mama Luz, who was watching the sunset paint the city gold. "You know," Mama Luz said softly, "grief is like these flowers. It needs tending, but when we water it with service to others." She gestured at the thriving garden. "It grows into something beautiful." Harper felt tears prick her eyes. "I wish I'd known Ava. You honor her memory through actions, Mama Luz patted her hand. That's better than words. Later that evening, Harper found herself on the Alvarez's small balcony, sharing takeout Chinese food with Ben and Eli. Paper containers crowded the little table, and Eli was attempting to teach Harper how to use chopsticks, resulting in more laughter than success. Like this, Eli demonstrated, his own technique, charmingly clumsy but enthusiastic. See? Not so hard. Ben chuckled, passing Harper a fork with a conspiratorial wink. The city stretched out below them, lights twinkling on in office buildings and homes. The distinction between upstairs and downstairs felt different now, less like a barrier, more like a bridge. Will the garden have more flowers next spring? Eli asked, carefully placing his chopsticks down. Harper met his eyes, saw the hope there that had first moved her heart that morning in the lobby. Yes, she promised. I'll be there to see them bloom with you. Eli reached for Ava's Bible, which still traveled everywhere in his lunchbox. He placed it on the table between them, and without prompting, Ben and Harper each placed a hand on its worn cover. Eli's smaller hand joined theirs. Dear God, Eli began, his voice clear in the evening air. Thank you for helping us remember Mommy the right way. Up above, stars were beginning to appear, and on the Vale Tower's rooftop, Ava's bench waited in a garden born of grief and grown through love. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you thought this was just the beginning, you're right. Click through and see where the story takes you next. If you enjoyed the story of Harper Vale, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.